caused the deadly SARS epidemic 17 years ago. It's a new type of coronavirus.
We are just waiting for our guests to arrive. Good evening, everyone. A very good evening to our very special guest speaker of the day, Mrs. Radhika Gupta, our moderator for this event, Mrs. Vinita Bimbit, past presidents, governing body members, and my fellow Flo family. I'm Pooja Garg, chairperson, Flo Lucknow, and it is a true privilege to bring to you this inspiring interaction between two great minds. Dr. Abdul Kalam Azad said to shine like the sun, learn to burn like the sun. And our guest today shines true than a dozen suns, so her story necessarily must be fascinating. Hailed among the top 30 businesswomen in India and rewriting financial history one day at a time, our guest today is a true inspiration of what heights we can scale when we combine hard work, determination, and vision. Let me tell you about her, a story which will surely capture your heart and your mind, for she is the lady who personifies the term sunshine mixed with a little hurricane. A true citizen of the world, Radhika Gupta moved across continents with her diplomat father, who was an Indian foreign service official. Radhika was born in Pakistan, where she had a complication at her birth, and she ended up with a broken neck, which she described as a weird tilt to her head. She's a graduate of Jerome Fisher Program in Management and Technology from the University of Pennsylvania. She received the Bachelor of Science in Engineering in Computer Science and Bachelor of Science degree in Economics from the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School in 2005. Radhika started her career that very year at McKinsey and Company as a business analyst and was soon part of the global asset allocation team at IQR Capital Management. Along with Nalin Moinis and Anand Jatia, Radhika founded the Forefront Capital, which was acquired by Edelweiss Financial Services Limited in 2014. Radhika Gupta today is the Chief Executive Officer at Edelweiss Asset Management Limited. She started at Edelweiss Global Asset Management as a business head of multi-strategy funds and was responsible for setting the strategic direction for the team's investment, distribution, and platform. She has been named among the 30 most powerful women in India, 2019 by Business Today, and has been nominated by AIWMI Top 100 Women in Finance 2020. Now, before we begin today's session, I request the IT team to please display the green certificate, which is a little token of our appreciation. IT team. IT team, please can you present the green certificate on the screen, please? We can't see it. We at Fiki Flow believe in practicing sustainable lifestyle, and as a token of our appreciation, plant a tree in your name in association with Trees for Tribals. You can track your tree on growstree.com with a unique identification number given on the green certificate. This is our small way of contributing to a cleaner and greener tomorrow. Thank you so much, Radhika, for being with us here today. I would now like to present our moderator for this event, Mrs. Vinita Bimbit, with a green certificate. IT team, please display the green certificate. Thank you so much, Vinita, for moderating this event for Flo Lucknow. Thank you. It is now time to introduce everyone present here to the ever gracious and very accomplished 33rd former National President of FICCI Flo, Mrs. Vinita Bimbit, who will moderate today's session. Vinita is Promoter Director in the Indian Art Investment Company, a specialist artist firm offering diverse services to art collectors and, more importantly, supporting craftsmen across the country. While at Flo, she created and subsequently released FICCI Flo's Gender Parity Index, a first of its kind in India, and started the famed Roti project among many other brilliant initiatives. Vinita continues to be deeply involved with all things related to Flo. She sits on FICCI Executive Committee for promoting art and culture and is India Chair for the Indian Asian Women's Business Forum. She is the proud recipient of the India ASEAN Award for Entrepreneurship and Leadership. A brilliant motivator and speaker, she has spoken at the UN on Beyond Gender and on the status of women on the Indian handloom industry. Now, without taking any more of your time, I request Mrs. Bimbit to please take this conversation forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you so much for that introduction. Before we start, I also want to thank you for trusting me to do this. And Radhika, I am so excited to be able to have this conversation with you today. While Pooja gave her introduction and so many words come to mind, adjectives that apply to you, CEO, entrepreneur, businesswoman of the year, most powerful woman. The words that come to my mind, Radhika, are outlier and storyteller. So Radhika Gupta, outlier, storyteller, welcome to this Flo event. You know, telling stories is one of the most powerful means to influence, to teach, and to inspire. And when Malcolm Gladwell wrote his book Outliers, he took us on an intellectual journey through the world of outliers, the best, the brightest, the most famous, the most successful. And there was one question that he asked. He says, what makes high achievers like you, Radhika, different? And his answer was that we pay too much attention to what successful people are like and too little attention to where they actually come from. That is their culture, their family, their generation, and the idiosyncratic experiences of their upbringing. And this brings me to my very first question. You were born in Pakistan, and it was quite the ride. You have been through many countries, many schools, many friends, to that fateful 19th floor where you wanted to throw yourself off in the university. I want you to take us through this journey to that point. Radhika, over to you.
So thank you, Vinita. Thank you, Pooja, and thank you to the entire team of Flo. It's a delight to be spending a Saturday afternoon with you. I have to say a couple of things. Firstly, I have done so many of these events, so many of these panels. I don't think I've got as sort of enigmatic a title as Sunshine with a Little Hurricane. I'm called Aflatun at home. So I shared that creative with my parents, and they found it super exciting. So thank you for that. And the second thing I must thank you for is that this must be the 500th webinar I've done, is something in that order. This is the first one that started 5 minutes before time. And I think, I take these things very seriously. My father was a diplomat, and I do believe professionalism and the things of, being on time and dressing up well, all these things are losing favor with the younger generation. So when I see things like that, it genuinely gives me a lot of joy. So thank you for that, and thank you for having me, and for, of course, all the gracious introductions. I think you said a lot of wonderful things, Vinita, when you started. And I think firstly, nobody thinks their journey is extraordinary. I mean, I remember when I was going to do the talk, Girl with a Broken Neck, and the person I was working with, I was like, what why is this story extraordinary? Why is anybody's life extraordinary? But I think in certain ways, what we think is very ordinary is actually the audience doesn't know what is different about you. I've learned this as a speaker. And so I think everyone collects a bag of really interesting experiences that were different. Now, in my case, I think most of my good experiences are a function of chance. I was born in Pakistan at that point because my father refused to go to Switzerland. And it's really funny because my mother was newly married and she was super excited to go to Switzerland. I mean, can you imagine in the 80s going to Switzerland or Pakistan and you're a newly married bride? She's telling me, you chose Pakistan? I mean, I was thinking Yash Chopra and Silsila had just released and I would be going to Switzerland. And we landed up in Pakistan. And she had, I mean, this is a woman's event. So she had gestational diabetes, which is apparently the reason I was born not only with the neck, but also super overweight. I was 13 pounds at birth is what I was told. If you see my pictures, they'll scare you. And I think one of the things that I grew up with, at least for the first 20, 25 years of my life, it starts with the neck, but I think people are very judgmental about how women look. I mean, I think they just are, and I don't know what. And you know, we are partly very judgmental to ourselves, but I think the world around us is also very judgmental. So if you're an overweight kid, and I do believe India, I've gone to school all over the world. I think Indian society is still a little kinder. I think at that point, some of the schools I went to, which were American schools, I think the world is less kind. So you get judged for how you look. If you're overweight, you get judged for what you wear. I mean, I remember driving my mother crazy for the prom gown I would wear. And if you know Nigeria, you can't buy clothes in Nigeria because there is no place to buy clothes. So my mother actually employed a little local tailor and she used to go buy cloths from the market. Tafeta milta tha us time with this shiny kind of silk thing. And she would get this local tailor to actually make stuff at home for us. And then, you know, it would still never be good enough. But I think all through our lives, women are judged through their looks. At that point in time, I mean, one of the things I haven't talked about is it was also a strange time to be an Indian living abroad. And my father says this, when I was in school in the late 90s, in an American school, you know, they would ask you to do these readings like they do in all schools from history books and all. And when I was reading with a very thick Indian accent because I had just come from India. And I remember the kids used to call me Apu, which is, I mean, if you don't know Apu was the character from The Simpsons. Because at that point in time, the whole IT thing had not happened. India wasn't what it was today. And I remember kids actually asking me, you know, do you know the great Indian snake charmer trick? And do you go to school on elephants? I mean, this was actual conversations with a classmate in the late 90s. I think that impression of India has, of course, changed significantly. So I grew up with my fair share of insecurities about how I looked. I think the 19th floor incident that you mentioned is a manifestation of all those insecurities because you are in some way rejected on a daily basis, right? I mean, even till a few years ago, and it still happens now, I deal with it differently. If you go to an airport and you have a weird kind of neck and the security women check you, they'll ask you, madam, aapke neck ke saath koi problem hai kya? And they'll just ask you. I mean, I don't know why they have to ask you. They'll actually ask you, aapke neck ke saath koi problem hai? And so if you keep hearing this all your life, I think as a kid, you become reasonably insecure about it. And then, as you know, Vanita, I had a spate of tricky times at Wharton where I was rejected by 7 consulting firms.
To Wharton, Radhika, I want you to talk about the different schools and the American school putting pressure on you to have hobbies such as riding and, you know, dancing and ballet, which you didn't have access to. And what was it that your parents did for you instead?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you bring this up. I think one is that every girl is sort of brought up to have some creative hobby, right? And it's like dancing or ballet or art. And obviously in Nigeria, everything is very expensive. So getting those kind of tutors and all, and this was not a time when online and all happened. So I didn't have access to horse riding and all that stuff. And the other thing is I didn't have any talent for it. I mean, later I realized that even if we had access, we didn't have talent for any of it. I have no creative talent whatsoever. And the other problem was that to keep kids entertained, and my brother is 3 years younger than me, to keep us entertained, you also can't go on vacation in Nigeria. So my parents said that let us sit and play cards. Now my parents have been playing cards for a long time because in the diplomatic circles, you play cards. I mean, it's just a function of our background. So we were obviously very hesitant that why would like you put an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old to play bridge. I mean, the last person, I had never heard of the game then. Even today, if you ask a bunch of 30-year-olds, do you play bridge? Chances are most of them would say no. So when you were 11, it was, I mean, but it was the only thing that we could do as a family. And so I don't blame my mother for trying to find a way to entertain us. And I think mothers are tremendously resourceful people. So that's what she did actually. And I remember when I was applying to college 3 years later, and you know, American colleges expect that not only will you have great grades, but you're going to be some Olympian. And I mean, I'm sure you have kids who've gone to college, you have to build a great college profile. I was telling mom at that point, what is my college profile? Yeah, I have great grades, I agree, but I can't ride a horse. I'm not a gymnast. I can't like paint. And we actually wrote bridge and community services, the two skills I had. And then, you know, I think harking back to college, obviously Wharton is a great school. But you're also put in a place where everybody around you is exceptional. I also think this process, I was just talking to a friend before this, young girl who's going through actually the same thing I went through now, which is applying for jobs at consulting firms. And she's doing this after her MBA. So I told her to watch my talk. And she said this process brings out the worst in people, right? And many of us, like I don't come from a background of corporate India. So I didn't even know how to dress up. Like I didn't own a lipstick till I was 21. I mean, I just didn't know how to do this. So you're taught to be a good student, but you're not taught to be a good interviewer. So I went through all that grapple. And I think the reason rejection in 7 interviews bothered me was one, because I felt like if you are a class topper and you've been taught all your life to work hard, then, you know, by that account, no one should reject you. And the second is, which is what they say in Three Idiots, that rejection hurts, but your friends getting in feels even worse. And so to see, I mean, it is true. It is actually human psychology. And I see it now because I lead a large team. So much of life is relative and comparative. So, you know, with the last interview, the 7th one that I got rejected, I wouldn't name the firm. What bothered me, and I was telling my husband this, was not just that I got rejected, but friends who I think had less grades than me got accepted. So I think that mentally bothered me, which is when I took that call to try and jump off the 19th floor. Thankfully, I didn't jump off the 19th floor because my friend, who is now my husband, actually decided to call the cops and send me to an asylum. So yeah, that's that story, and we can talk about the continuation of it.
Yes. So, you know, it's actually, I have to say, when you share stuff like that, it really inspires other people, and a lot of people can identify with it. So you graduated with a degree from a really prestigious and tough program. The Jerome Fisher program in management is engineering and business. And you didn't just graduate, you graduated summa cum laude. I mean, that's the highest distinction. And you were at your lowest point. You were in hospital being psychologically evaluated. Now you need to tell us, how did you pull your socks up and do what you did next when the next call came?
Well, firstly, I made a call to my father to get me out of the hospital. I mean, the rare diplomatic perks that you have. He was in Zambia at that point. He was posted to Zambia. So I called him at 3 in the morning Zambia time. So I told him I had gotten into the hospital. And I also told him that because of a guy friend, because he's like, who sent you to the hospital? You know, you would have been doing this. Who sent you to the hospital? So I told him about this guy who had sent me to the hospital. And I think more than me being in the hospital, he panicked about who the guy was because he didn't know I was seeing someone at that point in time. He's a traditional UP father. So anyway, he got me out of the hospital. Because I told him, and I told the hospital, I said, I have to go to Boston to meet McKinsey. And that's literally the 8th consulting firm. There were only 8 that came to campus. So I think my husband and parents did a great job pulling me together. I also think by that point, you know, you feel like you have nothing to lose. So you might as well just go ahead, right? At some point you realize what is the downside in these things. And so that's how I went ahead, and I went to Boston and I said, look, listen, if you've been rejected 7 times and you come out of a mental hospital, the worst thing that will happen to you is you'll be rejected an 8th time. So that's how I ended up in Boston for that interview. And I also found out that interview day that I was the only undergrad there for an interview. Everybody else was MBA. So it was like a non-traditional interview. So I was actually very freaked out by it. And obviously my biggest worry was that they're going to ask me why I've been rejected 7 times, because most people ask you in these processes that, do you have an offer from somewhere else? And like, what do you say? I don't have an offer from everyone else. I just came off a mental asylum. I mean, that's not a great conversation to have. So that's how that conversation started. I mean, I'll spill the beans on that conversation. It turned out to be a really interesting conversation. Firstly, there was a lady interviewing me, which was very nice. And she was a sort of hard-nosed person, but a very nice person. And yeah, I found out that she was a bridge player. She was a tournament-level bridge player. She had been playing bridge all her life. And when she saw bridge on my resume, that was the first thing she picked up. And so, yes, she gave me the job because I knew how to play cards.
And I remember you saying that it was a 90-minute interview and 85 minutes was about bridge.
And what fascinated her the most is the fact that I had been playing cards since the age of 11. And she said, was this planned? And were you a prodigy? And I mean, this is the amazing thing about life, right? I had not planned to play cards in life since the age of 11.
In fact, you were complaining bitterly to your parents that my friends have hobbies such as riding horses and ballet, and I have a pack of cards. And that pack of cards came to your rescue, and this lady thought you were extremely different. And
I think that's the beautiful thing about life, right? I think the universe sort of conspires to make it work for you. And I keep telling people that nothing you do in life is useless, right? That random skill that your mother or father or that you picked up somewhere it has a way of fitting together in the world. You just don't know. So I keep telling my team कि तुम्हारे साथ कुछ तो अच्छा होने वाला है, बस तुम्हें पता नहीं है कि होने वाला है. And so that is my fundamental belief, that whatever you do, I mean, US schools and McKinsey taught me the power of uniqueness, right? You're constantly looking for something different in a person, but different doesn't have to be being an Olympian. Different is a collection of what you said, Vinita. It's your background, your upbringing. I mean, I was different because I was a foreign service daughter. I mean, can you plan that? You can't plan that, right? I was different because I lived in Nigeria. I mean, this is just all a function of circumstances. And as I said, we often don't realize how cool our own backgrounds and how special our own backgrounds can be.
Yeah. In fact, there is a quote that comes to my mind, Albert Einstein, no less, who says, the person who follows a crowd will usually go no further than the crowd, but the person who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one else has seen before. And I think part of why you have done and you are where you are is because you have chosen a different path. So you got into McKinsey, interesting interview. It was about bridge, and I think she thought you were different, which also makes you unique and not like the rest of everyone else. You had a great salary, but that wasn't what you wanted to do. You did what is in every Indian parent's nightmare. You decided to give up the dollar salary. So tell us something about that.
Yeah, and my parents were horrified at that point in time. See, I think I was 24 when we decided to take the decision. And, it is hard to rationalize as a 24-year-old. I mean, there is that whole saying that young blood is hungry and foolish. And I think we fell into the hungry and foolish category. I had never lived in India at that point in time. I had two partners. They were guys. Both were born and brought up in India, but neither of us had worked in India. Now, and incidentally, 2008 was a very bad time on Wall Street, but all three of us managed to keep our jobs. Actually, three of us got promoted. So in my head and my parents' head and my husband's parents, he comes from a very Bandra middle-class family. We had just survived the worst and their kids were settled abroad. So you're right. It was a complete nightmare in their head that we would move back. We wanted to move back because I think in me, there is a kida that every 3-4 years you need a change. It comes from my parents' background. I mean, there's only so much excitement you get in a dollar salary. You just wanted to come back to India and do something of your own. I've also always had this, that I don't come from a business family, but many of my classmates at Wharton were from business families. Could I do something in business? So I think there were all those thoughts, but I have to tell you two things. One is, yes, my parents freaked out and my husband's parents freaked out. So the kinds of things they would tell us are, why don't you do this a year later? Abhi to market kharab hai. Wait a year later. The other one that I remember my husband's parents saying a lot, you should move back to India, but move back when you are like an MD with Goldman Sachs or a partner with McKinsey, and move back when you're stable and you'll get a 4 BHK in Bandra to live at the company expenses. You know how this goes. So that was the stuff that was in their head. But there is, and I have a lot of kids who come to me with similar ideas, and I understand the parent situation. One thing my husband and I told ourselves was that, look, we have adequate savings to do this. So we started earning in 2005. Thankfully, we made a lot of money in 6 and 7. I mean, a lot by our standards at that point. And as a young woman, I actually saved my money very aggressively and invested it, which I tell all young women to do. So ultimately, when I had to take the decision, I didn't need to seek permission from my father-in-law or husband or parents. I could do that decision on my own terms. The second thing that was important is we said, okay, what if this fails? And I do believe in life, you have to be practical and have a plan B, because I understand the aspiration of every Indian parent. I mean, they've spent money to send their kid abroad. I was a financial aid candidate. The kid has got a job. You're on track for a green card, and then there's a nightmare that, you're coming back. So for us, we said that we hadn't gone to business school. We got undergrad degrees in modern. If this failed, we could go back to business school. And that was constantly in our head, that we have the savings to go back to business school without asking our parents for any more money. And we have the qualifications to do that. So I always say that, wife, you should take risks. There also has to be some kind of plan B in life.
And something very interesting happened while you were packing your bags. You had your business plan, you had an X amount of money, and I think you were expected to put in about 50 lakhs to start your boutique firm, and the policy changed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know where you heard this one, but it was, so we were planning, we are in financial services. It's unfortunately a very regulated business. And we were very clear that if we start the business, we have to do something that can become big, which means it has to be regulated. You can't do this side stuff. So at that point, to get a portfolio management license, and we were smart, we were sitting in the US planning all the licenses, and we were actually talking to SEBI sitting here. 50 lakhs was the minimum capital you needed to get a PMS license. Divide that by 3 people, that's 16 lakhs a person. That actually was not, that was very manageable, plus money to live. I think it was like 3-4 days before we had to move back, and we had planned our resignations and everything, that SEBI decides to change the minimum from 50 lakhs to 2 crores. Now, 2 crores is a big number, because 2 crores divided by 3 is about 60-70 lakhs a person. I remember my savings at that point were 80 lakhs. And my husband's were 80 lakhs also. So that means 70 lakhs goes into the company. You obviously are not going to take salaries, and you have 10 lakhs each to live in Bombay. And we were very clear that we didn't want to live with my in-laws, as lovely as they are, and that we didn't want to take money from our parents, because that was something that we could not do. So that was a real shocker. And by that time, honestly, it was too late to turn back. So we just went ahead with it. And I think the first 2 years in Mumbai were actually really, really hard, because Mumbai is an expensive city. And I remember doing budgeting, a 1 BHK in Bandra will be this much and this much. And, it was also a little, my husband and I talk about this now, that we also went to school with very, very well-to-do classmates who were very successful professionals. And if you're a professional, you're earning a fancy salary, whether in India. And I remember for the first 2-3 years, we were too scared to invite anybody home, because here we were, these 2 bottom graduates living in a 1-bedroom house, and we could also not afford a car. So we bought a car, we bought a little Maruti Swift 3 years into the journey. So that period was a tough period.
It was a tough period. You were also chief sink unclogger, from what I've heard you say.
I was everything. I was chief everything except investments, because so we were all 3 investment professionals, and the boys decided that one person had to do all the other work, right? Because there is other work in running a company. So that meant marketing, that meant dealing. So I was chief lawyer, chief marketing, chief head of media, chief sink unclogger, chief head of HR, and chief tally operator, which is the accounting system. And the boys decided I would actually do all of it. And I kind of agreed. And so I did quite a bit of stuff. I mean, yes, we hired IIT interns, and we had a very tiny pantry at that point. I mean, everyone can understand this. And 2 years in a row, IIT interns have thrown dosas down our sink and sambar down our sink. I don't know why you would do that. And then they would refuse to admit. So I was the pantry manager. I was also the one responsible for getting the firm media coverage, and I learned a ton of interesting things. So I met Ramdev Agarwal early in my journey, and he told me one thing. He said, "Listen, you know, India mein jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai." And so he said, there are all these TV channels, and he said, "Radhika, I think you will be a well-spoken person. Why don't you go on all these TV channels and start speaking? Once they see you on TV, they'll think you are half successful." And I said, this makes no sense. So I would go and I would find journals on LinkedIn and I would tell them, can I come talk about stocks on your channel? And I was actually doing, there were 4 business channels at that time. I was actually on TV 4 days a week. And that's how we got our first few clients. I was chief lawyer. I was the one who got the PAN card for the company. And I'm very grateful to that phase because it taught me something very fundamental, that as a professional, and I was telling this girl this today, I actually, my happiness is not in sitting and doing finance all day. I get damn bored. I love a general management role. I think that was my first CEO stint. And it told me that actually what I want to do is a general management role that involves not sink unclogging, but some media and some legal and some managing people and some accounts and some of everything. That is my personality. And actually that phase helped me discover that. I'm very grateful to it.
I think women intrinsically are very successful in juggling things,
Yeah.
and also very good at managing things. Anyway, so Chief Sink Unclogger then goes and sells her company to Edelweiss for 200 crores. Now, I know you had other offers as well. Why Edelweiss? What was it about them that attracted you guys to sell to them?
It wasn't the money, and it was a long process. I think selling a company is a very emotional process for any entrepreneur, especially, and I think everybody has a story like mine of the first 3 years, especially after you've gone through what you have to build it. And there's a lot of sacrifice. And so we spent about 9 to 10 months. I actually led the investment banking process for this. And we talked to a lot of people. We talked to people who are bigger than Edelweiss. We talked to people who are smaller than Edelweiss. And it was also a little bit of a big decision because we had never worked for a company. See, financial services is not tech. You can't just sell the company and go away. You are actually not selling. You're partnering with someone because they need you to continue. So it's a place you're going to build your career for 3-4 years after. It can't be a chalo lelo and bye-bye Tata. So it is a very, very thoughtful decision. And so for us, finally, what worked was the culture. In fact, it's a funny story, and I joke about Rashesh, with Rashesh about this all the time. When the investment banker told me, let's meet Edelweiss, I said, I will sell this company to anybody except Edelweiss, because my impression of Edelweiss in the market was that it's a very aggressive place. And the banker was like, and I was not very polite in the first meeting with Edelweiss. I also remember that. And I mean, in most other meetings, I prepped a lot, etc., etc. I was very nervous. I don't think we prepped a lot. That's probably why we did such a good job in the conversation, because I think sometimes when you are not desperate, you do a better job. But as I met Edelweiss, I realized we are very similar people, and I think that's been validated 6 years later. Edelweiss is an aggressive but also very young place. It gives young people a lot of opportunities. That's what we saw then, and that's what we realized. In fact, everyone thought we would quit Edelweiss after 4 years because it was a 4-year kind of thing. This is 6.5 years into the company, and it wouldn't have happened if it was a transaction about money. It had to be about culture. So I think culture is thoroughly underrated. I keep telling my employees all the time. I think culture is thoroughly underrated.
So you have now, of course, taken it to a 20,000 crore company, and I think you plan to make it much, much larger. So now I want to move on to the next section of our conversation, Radhika. It's about mentorship and advice. You know, Flo and Fiki have this year launched a Greater 50% initiative, and it's a call for action towards equal opportunity for every Indian. And this initiative recognizes the importance of advice, the importance of mentorship. And we know that mentorship provides critical benefits, not just to organizations, but also to individuals. Now, with the 4th industrial revolution, the digital revolution, all the artificial intelligence, the algorithms, are they going to replace advice? And I know you have some very interesting stories. So I, in particular, would like you to tell us Rasesh's story about his mentor, Karan Johar being a mentor, Sachin talking about his mentorship, and the perennial and eternal Kirana stores of Mumbai?
No, so I think, by the way, my brand tagline is Advice Zaruri Hai. Edelweiss Mutual Fund's brand tagline is Advice Zaruri Hai. And it's not just a tagline for tagline's sake. It's something we live. And I will tell you some of those stories. And I'll also tell you my own story and approach to this. I don't think you can automate the fact that you need someone to guide you. I think the first guiding light in our life is parents. And most of us know that you can't automate parenthood. So I think that's I can't automate my mother's job. And I think if you talk to anybody, the point I make, and I make this in the financial services context, but it's true personally, I think if you look at any successful person, there is a strong role that advice plays. I mean, Rashesh talks, of course, about the role that Narayan Murthy played. Narayan Murthy was his client when he was at ICICI Bank. And he gave the advice to Rashesh to start his own business. He gave the advice to Rashesh to start being a business that was highly invested in giving employees ESOPs and making them owners. And he talked to Rashesh about values. And I think the tagline of Edelweiss is ideas create, values protect. And Rashesh always talks about the role that Narayan Murthy has played in his life. The reason you hear a lot of film examples from me is because I'm a box office buff. And one of the stories I read about Karan Johar is that, I mean, he makes okay movies. I don't think he makes great movies, but I think one of the reasons he's the most powerful people in Bollywood is he is an advisor to most successful film actors. And he actually wrote about how he enters the personal advisory board of film actors. And even someone like an actor needs someone to give them outside perspective in life. Where to strategically cast yourself. I mean, you take the case, there's a great case of Alia Bhatt that you can look at. If you look at when Student of the Year came out, the perception of Alia Bhatt was flaky, doesn't know how to act, not Indian enough. And he's charted her career, told her to do Highway, which was the second film, her third few films, so that she establishes herself as an actor. Kiara Advani has a similar story. So his power comes from being an advisor. And I'll tell you my own story. I was a terrified public speaker till 2016-17. The whole reason I got into storytelling is because of an individual called Captain Raghu Raman. I actually went to a training session that Edelweiss had organized with him. And I'm very suspect about training sessions. I'm like, these are usually going to be useless. And there were that 2-weekend session changed my life. The talk, Girl with a Broken Neck, I actually gave a scratch version of the talk there. And since then, Captain Raghu has been talking to me about the power of storytelling, vulnerability. So he's been a life changer for me. And now I actually believe that each individual should have the concept of a personal advisory board. I have one. And it is a set of people who are, they're more than mentors. They're actually an advisory board, and they should be across different industries. They should be diverse. They should be people who care about you, but have time for you. And they are constantly there as your bouncing board, and they should accompany you through life and see you change. So I have this personal advisory board, and it is game changing for me.
That's awesome. I haven't heard of a personal advisory board before. So basically, advice and mentorship is timeless. It should be customized, and it definitely should be flexible to change with the times. Radhika, I also remember you giving a Josh talk about a lot of women who put their careers on hold. And today we have so many young girls here who've had to put their careers on hold and look after a family. Just your little pep talk to them about why it is so important to do what they're doing.
I just think it's so important for us girls to be financially independent. I learned this from my grandmother. At that point in time, I don't think there was a culture for working women. My nanny was well educated from a rich family, and then she lost her father very early. And she always rules actually that she would have become a doctor with her level of education. But like many of us, she then decided not to work at that point in time. And then my nana lost his job very early in his career, and he had a very, very patchy career. She became the primary breadwinner of the family. And I think her doing that changed the course of women in our family. Because when my father was posted to New York, my mother tells me that she actually told my mother got married at 20, went to St. Stephen's, rejected going to IIM Ahmedabad to marry my father. I mean, who does that, right? So she did that. And when she went to New York, my Rani told her, you know, you have two choices. One is that you can chill in New York and enjoy this great country and, you know, all that. Or two, you can do that, but you can make something of it. So go get your master's and go build a career. And so my mother got her master's in education. Foreign service officers' wives are not allowed to have a corporate career because of conflict of interest. They can only be doctors or teachers. So my mother chose teaching. And everywhere my father worked, my mother worked. Every school that we went to, my mother also worked. She's 10 years younger than my father. So when he retired now, she's actually the head of a large educational institution in Delhi. And because my Nani was aspirational, my mother was more aspirational for me. She was the one who pushed me to study abroad. And she's made some choices with her career that she probably regrets making. So she wants to make sure that I move a step forward. So I just think having empowered women is not about a woman itself. It has the impact on generations. I mean, my mother-in-law comes from Mangalore, which I think is one of the most progressive societies for women. And there are so many of these Mangalorean maids, including the one who brought my husband up, who come from Mangalore to Bombay, etc. And Nat, this lady who brought Nalin up, because she came, she was a fourth standard dropout. I've seen her. She has been able to educate three of her siblings, take care of her parents back home, get herself married, and actually owns a tiny little house in Bandra. So I think a woman being empowered changes the course of the family, the ecosystem, and broadly society. So that is why I'm very passionate about the topic. And I also believe that we have all the skill sets of the future. I mean, that's the thing that nobody understands. So I keep writing these women things, and people are like, but it should be meritocratic, it should be meritocratic. I mean, we have all the merit on earth. I mean, women are
We have it in our genes, in our genetic makeup as women, I think.
women are the best financial planners on earth. For generations we have been getting household our mothers have been getting household allowances from our fathers to manage money. We take care of everybody in the household. We do it beautifully. The son, the daughter, the mother-in-law. We managed to keep some money on the side. In UP we called it Gupta. That was discovered in demonetization. The quantum of that money was discovered. So we managed to do that. And we managed to do that without a press release. And we are great cost cutters. And, you know, we are so good at accounting and we need audits. We managed to do this really, really well.
Absolutely. So from talking about, I mean, let's stay on the topic of women and move on to, well, advocacy of the rights of women on the grounds of equality. You know, gender equality is a goal in its own right. And it's a powerful force for upholding the main promise of United Nations 2030 agenda, to leave no one behind. So can you tell me a little bit about what you've done for women or what you wish to do for women in your organization?
So good question. And, you know, I'll start with the bad news and go to the good news. I think, you know, gender diversity is something that the narrative has started to happen, but I don't think people take it seriously enough. I think it is a checkbox activity. I think gender diversity will become serious when people realize women have an impact on the bottom line. Because unfortunately or fortunately, in corporate India, we don't do a corporate anywhere. We don't do anything till it hits the bottom line. Now, if I start with my own industry and then I'll come to my own company, in our own industry, I was doing some math. We have 45 mutual fund companies in the country. We have about 4 or 5 leadership positions per company: CEO, head of sales, head of investments, etc., etc. So you have probably about 150 to 180 leadership positions in mutual funds in India. 5 of them are filled by women. And so it is, I mean, people keep saying first women CEO. It's not something I should be proud of. It's something collectively all of us should be embarrassed about, right? When women are naturally good at money management. So I think while certain industries and banking has had certain phases, etc., we have a long way to go. At Edelweiss, we are about 23% women in total. We are about, in Edelweiss Mutual Fund, we are higher. We're about 28% women in there, still a long way from 50%. The good news, however, is we have a good range of women in mid-management. See, trying to solve for the CEO level problem is actually useless because this is the output. you have to solve for the mid-management funnel. So one of the things I'm personally trying to make sure is that we don't lose girls at mid-management, and in fact, we push up girls at mid-management. And honestly, it's taken personal intervention, and I hope it has certain outcomes. And there are small steps that you as a woman leader can take. For instance, at least in my company, I have noticed that every time a woman becomes pregnant in the workplace, this narrative starts, she is not going to come back. I mean, that is absolutely unnecessary, and I've killed it completely. I've had so many women, because I'm 36, 37, most women are in that age group. I mean, it's the age when most people have kids. Every one of them has come back. They've all worked through their maternity leave if health permits. Many of them are so inspirational that a week or two after having the baby, they're sitting and answering office calls. Even in this lockdown, there's a really heartwarming picture of my head of strategy sitting on her laptop with a phone, and her daughter sitting next to her with a small child's laptop and a child's phone sitting next to her. So that's the caliber of girls we have. We've made sure that we don't dock bonuses of any, and our industry is one where bonuses are large. We don't dock bonuses of people on the years they've had maternity leave. And this is a argument I've had with people, but I've made sure that if you work, then maternity leave is 6 months in your life. Yeah, give it a break. So I think there are a lot of small initiatives that we can take as organizations outside the usual stuff. And the third thing we try to do is make the culture of the floor. I think having more women also improves the culture of offices, not just in terms of the bad words, etc. But when you promote a diverse workplace, not just for gender, it becomes a diverse workplace in every other way. Everybody carries a lot of this baggage that I'm different, I'm the outlier, etc., etc. When the world around you is diverse, you will celebrate diversity of religion and diversity of background and diversity of language. So I think having women also promotes a healthier culture of the floor. It's okay to cry in our office, because I have cried in the office. And I had this argument with one of my bosses, and he was like, women who cry in the office are not appropriate. And I said, it's okay. If a guy swears in the office, and we excuse it saying, it was an emotional meltdown, it was a tough circumstance, then that is okay. But if a woman uses crying as a rare means to express an emotion, why is that not okay? So I think it's also a culture.
So there is a leak in the funnel, as they say, in corporate India. And I'm glad to hear that you're doing your plugging as much as you can to make sure women, yes, it's important that they are there in the middle management and senior management positions. It's not always necessary to be right at the top, So our last question in this segment, Radhika, before we go on to the investing segment. And this is on behalf of all those women in this group who are working with their families or who have family-owned businesses and have to work with their in-laws and their husbands. What is it like to work with your husband?
It's not easy. I don't know if it's recommended, but it's not easy. It has its pros and cons, and I don't think our society makes it the easiest. The pros of it are that your husband really understands. I mean, if I have to work late or if I'm going crazy on a project, I don't need to explain why it's important. Or if markets are really bad, if markets are down 5% a day and my husband is unavailable, I'm a markets professional, I better know why. The bad part of it is two. One is that there is not work-life balance. No matter how you try your dinner table conversations, everything is about the office. It just is. The second is, and this is a more sensitive one, is that, if you're working in the same industry, there is a lot of comparison that happens. Nalin and I have been victims of this. Sometimes he'll do better, sometimes I'll do better. That is a very, very tricky thing to handle. And as I said, our society doesn't make it easy on the guy or on the girl, on the better performing partner that year or on the worst performing partner that year. So I think that is the hardest part of it. Maybe less in a family business, but definitely in a corporate setup. So I think you have to handle it with great maturity and tenacity is what I would say, but it's not easy, to be honest.
It definitely introduces many facets to the relationship. Okay, so now, Radhika, we're coming to the Sahi Hai times and the Sahi Nahi Hai times. Let's talk about, or let's start the conversation about investment opportunities in post-COVID India, or as now people have started saying PC, post-COVID India, or AC after COVID.
after COVID.
So what is the right strategy? I mean, is it SIPs? Is it lump sums? Is it balanced funds? Conservative? Should we be conservative? Should we be aggressive? Should we move towards arbitrage? Have we bottomed out? Is this the time to invest? I'm going to hand this over to you now, and I'm sure there are going to be questions rolling in, so I shall take them as they come.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this is a tricky but still simple topic. So I think a few things I would say on finance. One is that personal finance is highly personal. So the personal comes before finance and personal finance. And always remember that. I think the biggest mistakes in personal finance are made when you try to compete with someone else. Personal finance is less about whether you invest in equity or debt or balanced funds or arbitrage funds. And I can answer questions on all that stuff, and more about what your goals and your risk appetite are. And I don't think there's a formula. For instance, people say if you are young, you should be an aggressive investor. I had disastrous experiences with money because when I was 22, I invested 100% in equities. And 2008 was a disaster, actually, just before we moved back for forefront, because I am a high risk professional. I work in capital markets in years where markets are down. My income is down, my firm does badly, my stock options are poor, and my husband is also in the same industry. So we are like 3 times the risk of markets. My finance strategy, therefore, despite how my age, is very conservative because of my background. And I think, and I am also not a person who reacts very well, despite being in the money business, to my portfolio being down 30%. It causes me stress. That is just my personality. So I think just as everyone has a unique individual personality, you have a unique financial personality, and it doesn't need to be the same as your friend or your neighbor or your brother or your father or whatever. And it is important to figure that out. So that is the first thing I would do. Figure out your financial, and this, by the way, is a great time to figure it out, because nobody understands their risk appetite in a good time. Then everybody thinks they're risk taking. In a bad time, when you lose money, you realize how much money you can lose. The second step I would do is, once you figure this out, and women are naturally fabulous at this, divide your money into buckets of goals. Short term, which you need soon, could need, and that has to be there, contingency money. Medium term, I call that 3 to 5 year money for whatever 3 to 5 year goals you have. And then long term, and that's like 5 to 7 year money. Once you've got these 3 buckets, then it's simple. The short-term money has to go into very conservative instruments. Now, whether it is arbitrage or short-term funds or debt funds, and I can answer specific questions there, but you can't be losing money there, and that cannot cause you stress. When you take extraordinary risks on short-term money is when most people have maximum stress, because keeping cash on hand and liquidity is important. Medium-term money, park in stuff like balanced funds, things you can afford to lose a little money on in the short term, but will do okay in 3 to 5 years. Long-term money, use equities, and then you should be fine, because then when long-term money does badly, it's long-term, it's okay. In the long term, it works out. So that, I think, is a quick approach to managing money. Please use advice very sensibly. There are great financial advisors out there, and please educate yourself. Even if you use a financial advisor on money, it is a myth that money is complicated. It is also a myth spread by men that you need to be Warren Buffett, or you need to sit in front of a Bloomberg terminal, or you need to talk shop all the time to be good at money management. You need to be goal oriented, you need to be disciplined, and you need to have basic knowledge which is available everywhere to manage money well. You do not need to be Warren Buffett. In fact, we just started a podcast series called Money Connect, where we are using lessons from things like Ramayana to tell you about money management, because I genuinely believe there's a lot to learn from money management about our own culture before we start adopting gurus from around the world.
Excellent. Radhika, so there are 2 questions that have come up on the chat box. Pooja, do you think we could unmute Kiran Gera? She wants to ask a question. She's just sent a message. And after that, Renu Basu.
All right. ITT, please can you unmute the 2 ladies?
So we shall go with Kiran Gera first.
Yes.
Kiran, please ask your question if you're unmuted.
Yes. Radhika, hi. I'm Kiran. I want to tell you that this has been an exhilarating session. It's been absolutely delightful because, like you, I also believe in telling stories. Nobody wants to listen to gyan. Nobody wants to listen to lectures. And the only way you can communicate, if you're spending your time and energy talking, the best way for someone to listen is when you're telling stories, and you did a great job. Of course, my friend Vinita did a great job too, because if she didn't ask you the right questions, we wouldn't get these exhilarating stories from you. So this was wonderful. I do have some advisors, and I do have a certain profile. So I'm coming to Kam Ki Baat, if I might say so. Now, I think I go by, as you said, some instinct, kya karna hai. And half the time, because I have a degree in economics from Delhi School of Economics, I'm battling with these guys who are saying, market बढ़िया है, ये है, वो है. I'm saying, नहीं, politically बट्टे बैठ रहे हैं, ये खराब हो रहा है, GDP नीचे जा रहा है. They say, नहीं, market ने ये सब incorporate कर लिया है. That's the usual answer that I get. But I'm genuinely asking you, that I'm confused. I'm conservative. A lot of my portfolio is not equity. There's, of course, very skewed portfolio with a lot of money in real estate, which is very difficult to part with at this point or even otherwise. What should one do this time? I mean, I know you gave me the buckets, but फिर भी समझ नहीं आ रहा बिल्कुल भी कि क्या करना चाहिए इस समय.
Okay, so two parts to it. Thank you for the lovely words. Firstly, I would urge you to separate your real estate investments from your financial investments, because I genuinely think, and I'm not the real estate expert here, so I'll keep that section.
They are separate.
And they should be separate, because one is liquid and one is illiquid. I think, this is a very, very funny time for markets, where people feel that the market reality, which is markets have been running up, is very separated from what is happening on the ground in the economy, because you see a lot of negative. And I think that's something that all of us are feeling. And there's, of course, this conspiracy theory. Will this all come crashing together? I'll tell you a few things. One is that markets do remain out of sync with what you think is the real economy for extended periods of time, especially in a time when interest rates are low and there is a lot of liquidity in the system. You are an economist, so you know this better than I do. But while you have all this chaos around the economy, you also have central banks and large institutions trying to pump liquidity to the system. So there are two counterbalancing effects. The second thing, which is more broad advice, is that it is really hard to time markets. I think trying to time markets is something that even fund managers do, quite frankly, very badly. So for me, the principles of basic asset allocation have worked. Come up with an asset allocation that works for me, and stick to it no matter what X, Y, or Z sets. 5%, 10% tinkering everyone can do to feel good about themselves. But I think 80% of life should be covered by an asset allocation. I think that makes the money decision a lot easier. Thirdly, I would, because you mentioned advisors, it's important to appoint advisors that you trust completely, and advisors who have the right incentives to work with you. There are definitely those who are out there who are doing the right thing for you. Once you have them, I think you can place a lot of trust and confidence in them.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you. We have Renu Basu. Could we unmute her, please? Pooja?
Yes.
Renu, are you?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Hi, Radhika. So wonderful to see you. I was, when Vinita invited me, I said, oh, I've had the wonderful pleasure of sharing the dais with you exactly 6 months ago at the Taj Lands End. So your story was so enjoyable. I want to say that I'm not a good money planner. Vinita knows that I'm a good money spender. And I also cried a lot in my entire career. I just wanted to ask you, because I think you're really a true role model for a lot of the young women who are coming into the workforce. A lot of them leave. I've also faced this, leave once they become mothers. Do you believe that with working from home, it may be a way of life, at least in the short to medium term? Would that ensure that there are a lot more women who stay in and not opt out? What is your view on that?
So, hi Renu. Renu's a star. Yes, we did. We shared a dais, and that was the last event I've done in public
Correct.
before the lockdown. And then during the lockdown, she was kind enough to come and inspire my team. I remember we had a phase where we were all complaining that we're in financial services, things are so bad. And I said, let us talk to someone from the hotel industry. And I think Renu gave them a lot of perspective. So it was fabulous. We have very wonderful memories. I actually agree with you, Renu, on this a lot. I think that COVID has changed the stigma around work from home. I think prior to COVID, and I was talking to friends of mine who run sort of family businesses and manufacturing companies, even less professional than many of the worlds that you and I inhabit. And even in their world now, work from home has become acceptable. And I think women have to become the net beneficiary for it. Even something like maternity leave, I think, which is when the phase when women drop out, you actually have a lot of young mothers tell me, I'm not a mother, you do have time in maternity leave to do a little bit from home.
Correct.
And now that work from home has become an acceptable social norm, I think it's actually very good for us. In fact, in our office, we are allowing work from home even after COVID, and we are retooling our office so that some of our staff permanently works from home. And I think this can only be good for women. There are challenges also that women are reporting, I have to say, on the other end. So I'm hearing stories of how mother-in-laws are saying that if you're working from home, mujhe chai do or mujhe nashta do. Space constraints are also a little bit of a challenge for doing that. But I think if we can figure that out, it is net very good. I mean, people have been asking me, I haven't gone to office for 6 months. I would very happily persist in work from home mode. And I genuinely think it's good to be good for our girls.
I think,
Good.
Renu, that was a great question, because I feel COVID has changed two things. One is the face of education, and the other one is going to be work from home. So there's a question that has come up, Radhika. Beena Nanavati is asking, what do you think of international funds? Should we invest in them or invest directly by transferring money as allowed by RBI?
Okay, so great question. Very popular topic, probably the most popular investment topic I get. And by the way, if I don't answer everything, there's a lot of interesting content that is not related to buying our products on the Edelweiss MF site. There's a section called Insights I Love there, and it has summaries of financial books in 3 pages. It has podcasts, it has videos on asset allocation. It just has a lot of resources for you to just hang out and learn about money. We also have a YouTube channel where there's lots of stuff, so I thoroughly encourage you to check that out. I love international funds. I've loved them well before they became popular. International funds are basically mutual funds that invest in overseas markets like the US or China. I've personally been investing in them since 2011, because when I lived in the US, there was nothing about investing 100% in your home market. When I moved to India, it was like, acha, nobody invests abroad. So I think they should be part of your asset allocation. I will highlight that again. My only caution to you is, don't buy international funds because they're doing well recently. That is a bad argument. They are the same risk as Indian equity funds, whether you're buying US equity or China equity or India equity. Risk is risk, right? Equity is equity. So buy them for the right reasons. Buy them for a long holding period. Don't say, oh, NASDAQ is up 50% last year, I have to buy it this year. It's going to be a disaster. So do 10% of your money that is allocated can go to international funds, 10-15%. There are great mutual fund products out there. We run a basket of 6 funds now. And I think there are some great markets you can look at. For instance, themes like technology. Like if you look at technology as a theme in this whole post-COVID world, streaming, cloud, 5G, etc. You just don't get this in India, right? Because for us, IT is Infi and Wipro. It's not the same thing. So we run a US technology fund that's dedicated. You can invest, and this is a little tricky as a patriot, you can invest in markets like China. It's one of the first markets to come out of COVID. It's also a large emerging market like India. So you can look at stories like China. So there are a lot of opportunities out there. Just buy them for the right reasons. Again, if you go to Edelweiss MF, there's a lot of learning on international funds.
Great. Somebody asked the name of your podcast, which is Money Connect. Yes. And Pooja, there is a lady, Upasana, who wants to ask a question. Okay. Could we unmute her? Are you okay for time, Radhika?
Yes. I'm putting those things in the chat window again.
Okay.
Can you call out to her?
Upasana, would you like to ask your question? Has she gone off, is it? She sent me a message privately saying that I'd like to ask a question.
She's not there with us.
Okay, so Upasana has moved off. There is a question from Anuradha Pitti. She says, Radhika, can you elaborate a little bit on asset allocation?
Okay, so I have to come back and do a long session on this. But there is a good talk on YouTube that I did when I just became MF CEO on how to think about asset allocation and why it's important. It's on YouTube. It's Radhika Gupta's CFA 2017. I'll put it in the chat window. Broadly, asset allocation, I think, is like a balanced diet. It is not putting all your money in one asset class, whether it is equity or fixed income, and it is finding the right balance. Just like a balanced diet has some amount of dairy and grain and vegetable, I think a good asset allocation has some amount of fixed income, some amount of large and mid cap equities, international funds, and potentially gold. What your asset allocation, I think, is a function of your risk appetite and your goals. And once you have an asset allocation, I highly encourage you to stick to it. I have realized people who stick to asset allocations, even in the worst of time, never need to panic.
We have another question, Radhika. What kind of return, this is from Meena Goyal,
Okay.
what kind of return can we get in a technology fund? And she says international technology fund.
Okay, this is a very tricky question. Because if I take the proxy, so one, I am very conservative with projections on anything. That's just my beast. So if you ask me what kind of equity returns you'll get in India, I'll say 10% and everybody will get upset. I think, I would only say it's a high risk, high return asset class. I mean, the last year is too much of an aberration. The numbers look too good. I think our US tech fund has probably delivered about 17% in dollar terms. Again, it's been a great run, so that's why I'm very, very cautious when I talk about these things. I would encourage you to look, when you look at funds, to look at both their best case outcome and their worst case outcome. I think your experience as an investor will be very good if you look at the best and worst case outcome. In the case of this specific fund, again, lots of the information is available in the product page of our website, Edelweiss US Technology Fund, so you can find that data.
Radhika, you've been here for an hour and it feels like 10 minutes. And I have to say, as I wind up, that Radhika Gupta, you are une femme extraordinaire. May you continue to bring extraordinary to everything that you do. And with this, I'm going to hand over to Pooja. Pooja, over to you.
Thank you, Vinita. I think the energy coursing through us after this exceptional and inspirational session with you, Radhika, I think it's resonating with all of us here today. And I think your humility coupled with your brilliance and your vision has made this session a memorable one for all of us. You're amazing and truly a star. I would also like to personally thank Mrs. Vinita Bimbit for agreeing to moderate this event.
It was my pleasure.
You brought exceptional insight to this discussion, Vinita, and made it super relevant for us. So thank you so much, you two most amazing women. And now I would like to call upon our Senior Vice Chair, Mrs. Arushi Tandon, for a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you, Pooja. Good evening, everyone. CEO Radhika Gupta default philosophy in life and business is that doing good things differently is key to fulfillment and success. Radhika's approach towards life is not only an inspiration for us, but also serves as a reminder that life is all about defining one's dream and taking chances along the way. Her journey, and most significantly, is a lesson for us to recognize, reflect, and take action for what we believe in. Thank you, Radhika, for giving us sound advice on what to focus on during the ongoing COVID-19 induced market turmoil. We would like to specially thank Mrs. Vinita Bimbit for being the fireball that she is. You have been outstanding today, and your conversation skills enabled us to have a truly fulfilling session with Radhika. Thank you, Mrs. Bimbit.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Radhika. It was awesome talking to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody who joined us for this session today. Can we just take a quick picture now? So all of us, if you all could just put on your videos, then we could just click a good picture. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you. There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you. You all have a great evening. Thank you.